But good morning, everyone. My name is Mike Green. I am a Keller Williams agent here in Charleston, South Carolina, also known as the city where the tea is sweet, but our accents are even sweeter. So, been with KW for 21 years now. Individual agent here in Charleston. I do have a transaction coordinator that's a part of my organization, and I also have a part-time virtual marketing person who's phenomenal. She's actually based in Dallas, or just outside of Dallas. So US based VA that I have, but no other agents on the team. I do have the two admin personnel, kind of front end and back end, who really make this show run the way that it does.
I think it's important that because I know cousin Mo who chimed in. I think she's got, I'm not sure, Mo, if you've got virtuals, but I think she does. But I know she's got, she's got some right hands like my right hand, Christina, who you see.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that when we're performing at the level that you are and Mo is and so many others, that again, no one truly succeeds alone in this business. And I used to be so prideful in saying that I was a one-man wrecking crew, right? But I've always had some type of support, someone like Steve, my buddy here, and Richie, who I consider a dear friend now, that I could always lean on for sometimes counsel and or support. So again, I think it's a beautiful thing that you've got those people who, again, aid and assist you, but so you can perform in your 10 or your 20%, right?
Yep, absolutely.
Beautiful. Well, not sure in which direction you wanted to go, but for me, Mike, I keep a note on every guest host, and I think a couple of things. One, basically, you're almost 100%, sphere of influence there on your business. I think that's something I'd love to touch on, because
Okay.
I know my percentage is pretty darn high, because I'm upwards of 80-something%, I believe. Christina could probably give me, specific details. I think in coaching, and I'd love to touch on that, because I coached, it wasn't AAU, but it was select basketball. And even being a football player myself, there's so many similarities, parallels between coaching and what we do. And I think the service that we provide, the mentorship, I think that's something I'd love to touch on. And again, I also know that you're an instructor of Quantum Leap. And I think that I'd like to start there, because I'm sure there's so many lessons through Quantum Leap that you can share briefly with us, because it's not I think Quantum Leap's not a Keller Williams class, right? I think it's about, again, don't let me steal any thunder, but when I've taken it a couple of times, so, and I've got benefit from it.
So if you don't mind, Ben, then can we start with the coaching?
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
then I'll go from the coaching and work my way back to Quantum Leap, and then we'll come back and talk about where my business comes from and how much is where and all that.
There you go.
So the one thing I did not mention in my intro was I coach high school baseball, have for the last 17 years, and I also coached high school football for 4 years before that. So I've got a total of also 21 years of coaching experience. And to the point that you just mentioned, Ben, like sometimes when I'm on the baseball field and I'm sharing certain messages with players, I hear myself in my head, right? And I'm like, I need this more than they need this, right? Like it's something that I'm saying to them, and it's in the moment of a baseball practice or a baseball game, but I'm like, I need to leave here and apply this to my real estate business. So when you talk about the parallels that exist between athletics and business, or even just life, it's funny when they show themselves, right? Like it's funny when you just hear certain things and you're like, wait a minute, that it's being said over here, but it applies over here. So honestly, if I look back at, I've been licensed for 21 years. I think my business probably started to take off about 12 years ago. And I also feel like 12 years ago was around the time that I started hitting my groove as a coach, right? And so I feel like the two worlds came together. And that's kind of where I was able to take just certain lessons that I was giving and certain lessons that I was learning and applying them in my business. So for instance, one of them for me, I'm not a systems guy at all, which is why I have two young ladies who help me tremendously on the front end and the back end of my business. And so they kind of put some things in place. But the one thing that coaching has done for me, and I was actually afraid it would do the opposite, is it's made me pay more attention to what I'm doing with my time. Right. So for me, for anybody who knows kind of how high school baseball works in the South, we have good weather pretty much year round. Right. So in the fall, I've got workouts twice a week with players from 4 p.m. to 5:30 p.m. And then from about mid-January to say early May, I'm on a baseball field every day, Monday through Friday, and some Saturdays from 4 p.m. to about 6:30. So my real estate day, and what's the peak real estate selling season for most of us, ends at 3 p.m. Right. So I had to figure out, if I'm going to continue to coach, how do I get to the point where I'm as productive as I can possibly be between, say, the hours of 8 a.m. Right? Because life gets really tricky after 3 p.m. where there's games, practices, like just whatever. So now that doesn't mean that I don't sometimes step away from something while I'm on the field to take a call or do something. But for the most part, real estate ends at 3 p.m. So if there's one great thing that's come out of baseball coaching outside of the relationships and the lessons that we'll get to, it's that I've been able to become really structured with my time, which is not natural.
Me either. Me either. I thank goodness. Christina really helps me, but I've had to, and I've gotten better. So I'm giving myself some grace there, because forever time management was not my friend
Right.
at all. Right.
Right.
So again, we've learned, we've matured, we've developed, and I think that's the beauty of being a top performer in this business, because you understand there's some weaknesses, there's some holes in your game, right? Your left fielder is not, he doesn't have a strong arm, right? So sometimes you might
Absolutely.
compensate for that. You do what you have to do. So yeah, I
And
love.
if I can elaborate on that a little bit, going back to the whole time management thing, um, I think I fell victim for many years to the whole, you know, grind and I'm 24/7 and like you're trying to do all that stuff and it's not working because it's not who you are. And so even now I don't necessarily do like the 8 to 11 a.m. lead gen and like my schedule's not set up like that. But what I have realized works for me, I'm a night owl, right? So most nights I'm not in bed before 1:30 a.m., right? But the way my day works, every morning, I'm up at about 7 between 7 and 7:15. I'm on the pivot shift ahead call with James Shaw every morning at 8. I get off of that call and I have a meeting with my VA, and we'll kind of talk about some things that maybe were discussed on the call or just some different projects that we're working on. But then my day moves into what I finally figured out was my magic pill, so to speak, a few years ago, which is one of my 90-minute blocks. So if I'm completely honest, I probably have 3 90-minute blocks a day where all of my real estate related work gets done. So I block, let's say after the James Shaw stuff, that doesn't count. So 8 to 8:30 is not included here. I'll say from 9 to 10:30 is when I'm doing lead gen. That's it. I only hold myself to doing some sort of lead gen between 9 and 10:30. That's lead gen. That's if I have a morning appointment, it all has to fall in that 9 to 10:30 a.m. window. And a few years ago, I got to the point where I was okay. I accepted the fact that 90 minutes is all I got for you in the morning. It's fine for me to do whatever else I want to do from there. So some days I literally will take a nap at 10:30. Some days I will turn on the TV and watch Sports Center, and I'm not telling anybody else to do this, right? But that's my morning block. My morning block is over, and I'm not beating myself up about not doing anything else in that morning block. Now, I also know come spring, I've got practice at 3 o'clock. So I have an afternoon block. My afternoon block usually goes from about 12:30 to 2. right? So 12:30 to 2, same thing. If I got an appointment, appointment goes there. If I'm doing some lead gen, it goes there. If I'm whatever I'm doing that's real estate business related happens in that afternoon block. Um, I'm done at 2 o'clock. I do whatever I want to do. I go to practice. And then I have a nighttime block. So here's where it gets a little tricky because I know some folks go to bed a little bit early. My nighttime block happens from about 11 p.m. till about 12:30. And that's when I do most of the admin type work that I need to do, the stuff that needs me. Because at that point I've watched all the TV that I'm going to watch. I'm not going anywhere. I'm usually not getting any phone calls. I'm not getting any text messages. So distractions are gone at that point for me. Right. So it's crazy. Like when I started paying attention to how productive I can be at that time of day, when for years, all I've ever heard is the other hours are the ones that I was supposed to be more productive in. Right. But when I stop and look at it, I get so much done between 9 a.m. and 10:30 a.m. So much more done between 12:30 p.m. and 2 p.m. And then I get a ton of stuff done at like midnight. Right. So I say all that to say not necessarily that folks need to subscribe to those times of day to work, but figure out what works for you. Right.
Amen.
Like everything that we hear works. It's obviously worked for somebody. There's success stories all over the place. And yet that stuff doesn't always work for you. So you got to figure out like what works. If 8 to 11 doesn't work for you, don't try to fit yourself into that 8 to 11 box, right? Find whatever works and focus on that.
Mike, that to me, that's so powerful, and I hope folks didn't miss that. And I think it's knowing who you are. And if you don't know you, then it's difficult to know
Right.
others, right? And for me, I'm not as bad as you. I've had a sleep disorder my entire life, and so for me, it's 12, not 1 or 1:30.
Yeah.
But my most productive hours are when Christina leaves, typically around 6 or shortly thereafter. I'm normally here till 7 or 7:30 because it's that block that I'm really productive. There's no one here except for Maria, who cleans the building. So typically it's me and Maria, and I've got my music and my thoughts, and I'm really productive during that short burst. So
Yep.
I can sprint. It's just difficult sometimes for me in the marathon, but it is what it is. So
Yep.
thanks for sharing that. So
Yep.
um what else? What else are you thinking? Because again, you've had massive success. And I think for me, that's what's beneficial for people to know that there's so many ways to succeed in this business. And you know, I think you're a master at one or two, because I
Mhm.
think we all have a velvet rope. And
Right.
I think Mo brings so much to the table there in the San Antonio area. And if it's your sphere, how do you continue to love on them and get so much business from them? Is it just staying connected, or is there something else you do?
Yeah. So not sure if everyone here is familiar with Michael J. Mayer and the book 7 Levels of Communication. He was the author of that. So I coached with Michael some years ago, probably at this point, 10 years ago. And again, that was something else that I found that just fit my personality, right? Like it fit who I am. He's not all about cold calling and calling, FISBOs and expireds and doing a ton of open houses like that. That was never my thing. I tried it, couldn't stick with it because it wasn't my thing, right? And so for me, I'm a huge relationships guy. I'm a huge um, make folks feel like family, right? And so being from Charleston, which not a lot of people are, right? Like I'm born and raised here, so this is actually home for me. Um, I wanted to feel like home for everybody. I wanted to feel like home for the people that I grew up with here who feel like it doesn't feel like home anymore. Right? Like I want to remind them of all the great things about our city. And then people who are considering moving, I want them to feel like, hey, this can be your home too. So a lot of what I do in terms of the sphere aspect of my business is client events. So we've actually got an ice cream social coming up in 3 weeks. And that's just me inviting my sphere, which I've whittled down to about 250 people. Again, if you know Michael, he teaches you that you can't really have strong, deep relationships with more than 150 people at a time. I've gotten it up to 250. Don't know how strong and deep those are. I think they're fairly strong and fairly deep. But 250 is kind of my number right now. The one thing I found that works though with my client events over the years, along with all of the communication that happens in the invitation process, like all the different things that go on with getting people there, is I started about 6 or 7 years ago requesting that everyone that I invite bring someone that I don't know. Right. So that's my way of growing my sphere one
Yes.
without me having to go out and talk to strangers.
Love it.
Probably doesn't seem like it here, but I don't talk to many strangers. I'm not the guy that's going to show up in a room or at an event and go talk to everybody. Just doesn't happen. But if I invite 250 people, and typically when we do things like ice cream socials, happy hours, family fun days, like those sorts of things that we do, we'll have about 35 to 40 of the 250 people like show up with like I know I can count on like 40 people no matter what. Some events have a little bit more, but I know at a minimum I'm gonna have 40 of those people. And then I'm always like, if I get half of those 40 to bring somebody that I don't know, that's now 20 new people. Right. And I think from those events, what you got is what I call third party validation.
Amen.
So when Ben shows up at Mike's event and Ben brings Susie, who has no idea who or didn't know before today who Mike was, Mike doesn't have to do a whole lot after the event except not fumble the ball.
Amen.
Right? Right. The fact that Ben says you should show up and meet this person is good enough for Susie to now believe that Mike's the person she should do business with. So as long as I don't do anything crazy, right? As long as I'm not on social media talking foolishness, right? Susie now believes that Mike's the best guy for the job. So that's what's really helped keep my SOI numbers in my business, my sphere of influence numbers, as high as they are, because I grow it from within, right? I'm not necessarily going out and finding random people and then taking 6, 12, 24 months to now make them feel like I'm the guy for the job.
Like I feel like I missed an opportunity because I just had my after Father's Day event on Saturday, right? I didn't
Okay.
want to do the following week, the previous week, because it was Father's Day weekend, right? And I feel like you might have already had commitments. And so I did it last Saturday and it was a brunch. I didn't reach out and have them bring another buddy. And so, Christina, as you hear me say this, I think there is an opportunity that we're missing on to increase our our database
Well,
and that third party
yeah,
validation. Yeah.
and I'm like, all my events are free, right? So there's no reason why the people that I'm inviting wouldn't invite somebody else. There's
Yeah.
no cost to anybody.
Yeah.
So at a minimum, they're going to invite somebody.
Yeah.
Whether those people take them up on the invitation is a completely different
Right.
story, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, it makes it very easy for them to invite somebody. And I think the fact that they're free makes it easy for those people to say, okay, I'll show up.
Indeed. Indeed.
Right.
What's crazy is I had 3 or 4 fellows reaching for their wallets, right? And they're like, they thought, that it wasn't free, that, we were all breaking bread, having a great time, and they were willing to pay their portion. I was like, no, I got this. And they're like,
Right.
oh, dang. All right.
Right.
Appreciate it.
Right.
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 So
So
next time,
yeah, and and sometimes I feel a little guilty, right? Because people will come up and start asking real estate related questions sometimes at these events. And I'm like, okay, I want it to be very laid back, very not salesy, right? And it just kind of turns into something else on its own. And if I could go back to when you mentioned the fact that I teach, Quantum Leap through KW Next Gen and all of that, similar concept. I've only taught it a couple times in the market center, but what I have done over the years, a lot of my former players are now coaches. And so every year, at the beginning of baseball season, my baseball team does it. Our very first day of practice, day of the week in practice, is QL. It's QL with Coach Mike. So that full day, we're going through Quantum Leap. But I've probably got 6 or 7 guys that I used to coach who now coach a high school sport, football, baseball, basketball. They're now all on board with every year I go and I teach QL to their teams, right? So what that's done over the years, though, some of those young men and women who I've taught QL to, who are outside of my program, have become clients, or their parents have become clients, because there's an invitation for that too. Like there's an invitation process that works around that. So the people that I used to coach who are now coaches, they'll send me all the contact info for their team, and then of course an invitation goes out and their parents see it. Their parents have got to sign like a waiver. It's not a real thing, right? It's just something I created, but it was a way to get the parents involved so that the parents know what their kids are going to be, some of what their kids are going to be talking about that day. So it's led to business from those kids when they grow up. It's led to business from those parents, but it's funny. It's become something that, like, in the local coaching community, the coaches know that I do, and so now people are like, wait a minute, I heard that you teach some sort of thing. And usually it's only like one thing that they heard that they remember. Like one guy came to me a couple weeks ago and he was like, I heard you teach some money thing. I was like, I have no idea what you're talking about. I don't teach a money thing. Like I don't, but there's a specific part of QL that talks about mastering the basics of money. And I guess whoever told him must have been trying to relay that message from that part. And he was like, yeah, I need you to come and talk to my kids about that. So, so again, that helps expand the sphere, right? And it turns into business, and it's never really, that part of it's not something that I set out to do to gain business. Right. That was more of I come from a family of educators, but I know I can't work in a school full time, right? What can I do to give back to young people? But it's amazing that when we start marrying our business with the things that we naturally enjoy anyway, how it just kind of blossoms in the more that we could have imagined.
Wow. Well, and Mike, one thing that I got from it also is that I think most folks on this call today, and those that will see it as it airs on my YouTube channel, is that you don't have to have this massive number in your sphere to impact your business significantly. I mean, you sell a lot of real estate with basically about 250 people. And I think between what I consider my A and B clients, I think Christina can chime in on this. I think we're probably 600 maybe, Chris, she's shaking her head. So I think we're around 600. I would love to improve that number slightly, but not just adding anybody, because I think we're at thousands and thousands for our C contacts, but those are people that I really don't know, that we're nurturing, trying to move them into a B status that I do have a relationship with. So again, you don't have to have huge numbers, but I do think you've got to serve that number that you have.
Absolutely. And I think that's a great segue into the other piece of my business, right? So I'm 100% sphere of influence and agent referrals. And so while I have about 250 in that sphere of influence bucket, right, and in that database, I also have a second database, so to speak, which is a database of agents. That database has about 2,000. And so about right now in 2024, 2023 and 24, about 42% of my business came from agent referrals. There was a time roughly 10 years ago where like 75% of my business came from agent referrals.
Wow.
Right. And that's things like, I've got all those agents, they get put on a newsletter. One of the things in my 90-minute blocks, right, is I have to call one agent every day. I've got to talk to one agent from some other city in the United States every single day. Has to happen. Well, Monday through Friday. Right. So some days I may happen to hit 2 or 3, but I have to talk to at least one every single day.
Love that.
That along with the newsletter, along with just social media stuff, and then attending events. Again, it's how those relationships get strengthened, and how it kind of works the same way. Those agents then introduce me to other agents, right? Who introduce me to other agents, and before you know it, you're at 2,000 agents.
There you go.
Yeah. And social media has really helped too on the agent side, with like making sure I'm paying attention to what's happening in people's lives. So the other piece that my marketing admin handles is we send out cards, right? So we
Mhm.
send cards when people win awards for certain things, or when they have children or grandchildren, or someone graduates, or like anything that we can pick out from seeing on social media or from a conversation that we've had, um, that requires acknowledgement, we try to make sure we acknowledge. So again, that's to keep us top of mind there. That's to hopefully strengthen those relationships,
Amen.
so that we're of course top of mind when they've got someone moving to or from Charleston, South Carolina.
I think success is simple. It's just not easy. And I love that because again, Christina can tell you exactly how deep our agent, referral base is. And I think it's pretty extensive. Matter of fact, I'm leaving here in about 10 minutes, going to a walkthrough for a gentleman who was referred by one of our agents out of Memphis, I believe. And so we're closing him, I think, at the end of the week. And so I like
Awesome.
it's important. It's an important part. Matter of fact, it's the fourth pillar of my business, along with my A and B's, my farming, my events, and then my fourth pillar are my agent to agent referrals around the country. So, guys, Richie's a prime example. Richie's in Prescott, Arizona, right? Um, I mean, he is a top professional, and I feel like we have a relationship, and I'd love nothing more than to send someone to Prescott if the opportunity presents itself. And I think Richie would do the same if he had someone like he trusted me with his kid. That is powerful.
That
Somebody trusting
is.
your kid, right? So
That
again, I
is.
appreciate that. I don't take it for granted. And I know that if I had somebody come into Charleston, man, you're gonna treat them like family, and you've got them taken care of. So relationships again can take us places that money can't. So man, I appreciate all you've shared. I'm sure because again, time moves so quickly. If there's one other thing we don't know, or a little bit of information that you'd love to leave us with. Is there something, Mike, that
Ooh.
you'd like to leave us with?
One thing you don't know, I feel like I've told you guys everything. I've got rid of all I got. I think I just want to reiterate the fact that we hear things all the time, right? Like you do this weekly. I'm sure that everybody every week has a slightly different spin on how they do things. And obviously, we've all had success doing what we do. The one thing I want to leave people with is just stop and figure out what works for you. Don't try to do everything you hear. Um, I'll be quick with this because I know you're about wrapping up. I had a young guy who's getting licensed reach out to me last week, and he was like, "Hey, if you could offer like one piece of advice for somebody who's just getting started, like what would you say?" And I was stumped for a minute because I couldn't come up with anything that sounded like really cool, right? I was like, dude, just pick two things, man. Pick two things that you want to do, pick two things that work, and focus on those. You're about to hear thousands of different things. Pick two. So yeah, if there's something I can leave everybody with today, I think that's what it would be. Pick two or three things that work for you, work for who you are, work for your personality. Don't feel guilty about not doing what everybody else is doing, but go master those things, or work to master those things. We'll never master them, but work to master those things, and you'll be fine.